We cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of life, size morning, for what was great in the morning will be little at evening, and what in the morning was true will at evening have become a lie. Carl Jung wrote those words nearly a century ago, yet he was describing the exact silent crisis you might be experiencing right now. This very evening, in this very moment, picture this. It is 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. You have just pulled into your driveway. The car you are driving is expensive, the leather is soft, the engine is quiet. On the passenger seat lies your briefcase, filled with the contracts you closed, the projects you managed, the battles you won. Inside the house, the lights are warm. Your family is there. On paper, you have won. You have the degree, the title, the house in the good school district. Your LinkedIn profile reads like a highlight reel of accomplishment. But you do not open the car door. You just sit there, gripping the steering wheel, while a heavy, cold silence fills the cabin. You feel nothing. Or perhaps you feel a terrified vibration in your chest, a voice whispering, "Is this it? Is this all there is?" You feel ungrateful. You feel broken. You feel like an actor who has forgotten their lines in the middle of a play, standing frozen on stage while the audience waits. You are not crazy. You are not ungrateful. You are not broken. You are experiencing what Carl Jung called the reversal of life's midday, the moment when the sun that has been rising all morning suddenly begins its descent, and you realize with quiet terror that the rules of the morning journey no longer apply. This is not a breakdown. It is not depression, though it can wear its mask. It is not a failure of will or character. What you are experiencing is your psyche attempting to complete a developmental task that our culture has no language for, no rituals to mark, and no guidance to offer. Today, we are going to explore why everything that worked in the first half of life stops working in the second, and what your soul is actually asking of you when the midlife darkness descends. Carl Jung was not alone in mapping this territory. Dante wrote of being lost in a dark wood, nel mezzo del cammin, in the middle of life's journey. Tolstoy, at the height of his fame, hid ropes from himself lest he use them. They all discovered the same terrifying truth. The path that leads upward in the morning leads nowhere in the afternoon. But Jung went further than any of them. He did not merely describe the crisis. He explained its purpose. He argued that your depression, your anxiety, your feeling of hollowness are not symptoms of failure. They are symptoms of health. They are your soul waking up from a decades-long coma demanding a new purpose. We are taught that life is a linear ascent, that if we just acquire more of what worked in our 20s, we will be happier in our 40s. More money, more status, more optimization. We have 50-year-olds growth hacking, their lives scrolling LinkedIn at midnight, measuring their worth by their productivity metrics. Jung saw through this delusion a century before it became an epidemic. What makes his framework so urgently relevant today is this: we are the first generation in human history to routinely live 30, 40, even 50 years past the point when traditional societies considered life's primary tasks complete. We have extended the human lifespan without extending our understanding of what those extra decades are for. The result is an epidemic of what might be called successful emptiness. High-functioning adults who have checked every box on the achievement list and find themselves standing in the ruins of their own victories. Jung saw this coming, and he left us a map. You might think that if you just work harder, get that next promotion, or buy that vacation home, the feeling of emptiness will vanish. You are doubling down on what Jung called the morning program. In the morning of life, roughly from adolescence to around 40, your psyche is oriented outward. The task is ego-building, establishing an identity, proving yourself in the social world, acquiring skills, building a career, finding a mate, raising children. This is the phase of expansion, accumulation, and differentiation from others. Do not blame yourself for being obsessed with these things. This is ancient software running on modern hardware. Evolution does not care if you are happy, it only cares if you are useful and reproductive. Nature bribes you with dopamine to chase status and security. Your anxiety about falling behind, your constant comparison to peers, your fear of failure. These are not personal weaknesses. They are survival programs optimized for the savannah, not the suburb. In the first half of life, we are essentially employees of nature. We are building what Jung called the container of our lives. Here is the metaphor that will guide everything that follows. The morning program is about building the container. the career, the family, the reputation, the security. You spend 20 or 30 years constructing this vessel, and by conventional standards, you succeed. The container is beautiful. The container is sturdy. But one day you walk through this house you have built, and you realize something devastating. It is completely empty of furniture. The morning program was about acquiring the means to live. The afternoon is about the meaning of life itself. And here is the unbearable truth. You cannot buy meaning with the currency of the ego. The tools that built the container cannot furnish it. In our modern world, we extend the morning indefinitely. We have no template for the afternoon. Our culture worships only the rising sun, so we keep applying morning rules to afternoon problems, wondering why nothing works anymore. The promotion that once would have thrilled you now feels hollow. The purchase of a nicer car provides a briefer and briefer dopamine spike. You find yourself scrolling through photos of your accomplishments and feeling like you are looking at someone else's life. This is not depression. This is your soul signaling that it is time to reorient. So what happens when you apply morning rules to the afternoon? Jung's answer was precise. You develop neurosis. We usually think of neurosis as a sickness to be cured, a malfunction to be medicated away. Jung saw it completely differently. He wrote, "Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering." Think about that sentence. Your anxiety is not a mistake. It is not a chemical imbalance to be corrected. It is your psyche's way of screaming, "Stop." It is a blockage of energy. The life force that used to flow into getting, achieving, accumulating is now flowing backward, looking desperately for a new outlet. Because you are blocking this energy, because you keep trying to restart the morning engine, it has nowhere to go. So it turns into anxiety, insomnia, rage at your spouse, a terrifying feeling of meaninglessness, what we call a midlife crisis. The pain you feel is the friction of your soul trying to turn the car around while you are still flooring the gas pedal toward a destination that no longer exists. This is why the midlife crisis often looks so pathetic from the outside. The sports car, the affair, the sudden obsession with fitness, these are desperate attempts to restart the biological engine. But the biological engine has completed its mission. The soul is demanding a spiritual engine, and you keep offering it premium gasoline. This is the hardest part, and there is no way around it, only through it. Ask yourself, who am I if I am not my job? Who am I if I am not a parent? Who am I if I am not the smart one, or the reliable one, or the successful one? To enter the afternoon, the hero of the morning must die. Jung called the social self we construct the persona, from the Latin word for the masks worn by actors in ancient theater. In the morning of life, building a strong persona is not just useful, it is essential. It is your social operating system, your interface with the world. But here is the trade-off nobody explains. Every piece of yourself that you exclude from your persona does not disappear. It goes underground into what Jung called the shadow. That vast repository of repressed material that lives beneath your carefully maintained surface. We have spent decades polishing our masks. We mistake the mask for our face. But in the afternoon, the mask begins to suffocate us. Consider a man we will call Elias, a composite of patterns Jung observed repeatedly. For 20 years, Elias was a shark. A high-powered attorney who lived for the conflict, the win, the adrenaline. He was the hero of his firm, the one they called when cases seemed unwinnable. His persona was flawless, competent, aggressive, invincible. At 45, he won the biggest case of his career, landmark victory, national recognition. That night, instead of celebrating, he drove home, walked into his kitchen, sat down on the floor, and wept uncontrollably. He realized, in that moment of triumph, that he did not care about the law. He had never cared about the law. He had spent his entire adult life fighting other people's battles to avoid looking at his own. His hero persona, the shark, the winner, was actually a prison guard, keeping his true self locked in solitary confinement. Elias understood what Jung meant. Shark Elias had to die so that human Elias could be born. The skills that got you here will not get you there. The death of the hero is not a tragedy. It is a prerequisite. Now we arrive at Jung's most counterintuitive insight, one that runs directly against our comfort, obsessed, optimization-addicted culture. Man needs difficulties, they are necessary for health. The growing sense of struggle in midlife, the feeling that something is dying, the darkness that descends despite external success. These are not problems to be solved, they are necessary conditions for transformation. Jung borrowed the alchemical term nigredo, the blackening, to describe this psychological state. In alchemy, nigredo was the first stage of transformation, when base material had to be broken down completely, reduced to its fundamental elements before it could be reconstituted into gold. Psychologically, the midlife nigredo is the breakdown of the persona, the dissolution of the identity you spent decades constructing. It feels like dying because, in a very real sense, something is dying. The false self, the adapted self, the container that can no longer hold what you are becoming. Just as a lobster must shed its shell to grow, leaving it temporarily vulnerable, soft, exposed, the psyche must periodically dissolve its protective structures to expand into larger configurations. The problem is that our culture has no concept of necessary suffering. We treat all psychological pain as a problem to be medicated, therapized, or distracted away. We have lost the understanding that some descents are not falls but initiations. A woman we will call Elena came to therapy at 52, convinced she was falling apart. Her marriage of 25 years had become a polite arrangement between strangers. Her children had left home. The career she had sacrificed personal fulfillment for now seemed meaningless. She expected to be fixed. She wanted to get back to normal. But what if this was not a breakdown, but a breakthrough trying to happen? What if the structures that were crumbling needed to crumble? What if the darkness was not the enemy, but the soil from which new life grows? Elena, as transformation took 3 years, she grieved the unlived life. She confronted shadow material she had spent decades avoiding. And gradually, painfully, she began to construct a new identity based not on what society expected, but on what her soul required. She emerged not unscathed. That would be too clean, but deeper, more authentically herself, more capable of genuine connection. If you are in the darkness right now, consider this: your suffering might be the entrance fee to your own transformation. Remember the empty container, the beautiful house with no furniture. Jung's term for the work of the afternoon was individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, distinct from the roles you play and the masks you wear. It is, in many ways, the opposite of the morning's task. Where the morning demanded conformity to social expectations, the afternoon asks for authentic self-expression. Where the morning required building walls, the afternoon asks you to make them permeable. Where the morning was about becoming somebody, the afternoon is about becoming yourself. This is how you furnish the container, not with more achievements, but with meaning, not with more possessions, but with purpose, not with more masks, but with wholeness. You might think you need to become a better person in the second half of life. Jung said something more radical. You need to become a whole person. I would rather be whole than good. Being good is just another performance for society. Being whole means reclaiming the parts of yourself you abandoned to build your morning persona. Start looking at what irritates you in others. That is your shadow calling. Do you despise lazy people? Perhaps your shadow is begging you to rest. Do you hate arrogant people? Perhaps your shadow is begging you to assert yourself. Stop fighting these demons. Invite them for tea. They hold the energy you need for the second half of your life. We finally arrive at the purpose of the afternoon. Reproduction, survival, the continuation of genes. The afternoon is for culture and spirit. Meaning, wisdom, the continuation of something beyond mere genetic material. In the morning, we are selfish to survive. In the afternoon, we must become selfless to transcend. But this is not the selflessness of a doormat. It is the selflessness of the sage. You are no longer building the ego. You are distributing the wisdom you have gathered. You move from success to significance. In a world obsessed with youth, this is a rebellious act to say, I am no longer competing in your rat race. I am tending to my garden. I am mentoring the young. I am creating art not to sell it but to make it. Ask yourself, what would you do if you had nothing left to prove? What would matter if no one was watching? What seeds would you plant if you did not need to see them bear fruit? These are the questions of the afternoon, and they deserve answers that are not performative but genuine. The sun does not apologize for setting. It does not try to freeze itself at noon. It understands that its descent is just as magnificent as its rise. Its purpose in the evening is not to burn brightly for itself, but to illuminate the stars that were invisible during the day. Remember that feeling in the car, that silence, that cold weight in your chest. That was not emptiness. That was space. Space for something new to enter. Space for the furniture that will finally fill the container you spent your morning building. You have built your house. Now it is time to live in it. The reversal of life. Midday is not a catastrophe to be prevented, but a development to be embraced. The darkness is not a punishment, but a chrysalis. The death of the old self is not a tragedy, but a prerequisite for the birth of something more authentically alive. You are not failing. You are not broken. You are being called to complete a journey that most people in human history never lived long enough to take. Jung wrote in his memoirs, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." The morning gave you the tools. The afternoon gives you the chance to use them. If you are ready to stop chasing the morning sun and start navigating by the stars of the afternoon, if something in these words named what you have been carrying in silence, you are not alone. This channel exists for those who refuse the shallow answers, who know that life's deepest questions deserve more than productivity hacks and positive affirmations. Subscribe, not because we ask, but because you recognize that some conversations are worth having. The afternoon awaits, and it holds depths that the morning could never imagine. Do not be afraid of the dark. It is where the true work begins.